The most recent report by the European Union, NATO 2030, draws attention after warning that China's presence is the greatest threat to Europe. The NATO 2030 report, first published on December 1st at the meeting of the NATO foreign ministers, noted that China does not pose an immediate military threat like Russia, but threatens democracies by virtue of its influence and ambitions in the country international community expanded. The report also set a warning. We should prepare for the threats posed by both China and Russia. The 67-page report, written by outside experts at the request of NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg, shows that the EU's position on China has become increasingly similar to that of the United States over the past year. The US has treated China as the number one public enemy in the world and has consistently informed the world of the ambitions of the Chinese Communist Party. But now the European Union is also actively sympathizing with the US position, and it seems that it has begun to stand with the US. In particular, the report actively incorporates US claims that Chinese telecommunications equipment company Huawei posed a threat to NATO national security and information. The NATO report states, China, based on authoritarianism, posed a serious challenge to an open and democratic society because of its territorial ambitions. China does not compete with Europe as a simple economic entity, but approaches as a competitor of the system. In addition, the report pointed out that China is infiltrating the infrastructure across Europe based on technologies like 5G, and issues like cyber disruption and intellectual property stealing are disrupting European society. The European Union should be aware of the challenges posed by China's hunger for power in the 2030s, and we should respond strongly to China's actions through political solidarity. The report also instructed the European Union to look more closely at 4 points. First, NATO should establish an advisory body to manage China's various tactics to protect the security of its allies. If NATO members are threatened by China, NATO must take a joint action at the same time. Second, NATO must work together and invest more to counter China's expansion strategy through 2030. Third, NATO should share information on China within the alliance and strengthen its capability to combat various European Union attacks, including China's cyber attacks. For future exchanges with China in particular, a joint response based on strong cohesion among NATO member states is required. First, NATO continues to open channels for political dialogue and cooperation with China, but this must be defensive in nature. China must be informed that the European Union's allies will jointly respond to China's senseless attack. When the report NATO 2030 was published, the Chinese authorities have been put to shame. A South China Morning Post that reported it quoted a Chinese official in charge of the European Union as saying, the Chinese authorities were amazed that this report described China as a threat to Europe. Shortly after the report was released, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Hu Chengyin dismissed everything as if nothing had happened and said, the report wasn't a big deal, but we urged the NATO members to correct their understanding of China. The SCMP followed with several expert statements. NATO expert Louis Simon, professor at the Free University of Brussels, has carried out this analysis up to this point. The confrontation between Europe and China is not as obvious a confrontation of power as the United States and China are waging, but it shows that there is a broader ideological conflict between democracy and dictatorship. Former NATO Secretary General Anders Fogh Rasmussen also said, with the expansion of the China's military power, malicious strategic investment and false information campaigns in NATO's sphere of influence, NATO must find new ways to work together on defense. In addition, the SCMP pointed out that the confrontation between China and India is also one of the reasons why European countries have taken a strong stance towards China. Europe believes that in addition to serving European economic interests, India has values similar to a democratic country in Asia. With this in mind, the NATO 2030 report also suggested we should build a cooperative relationship with India to respond together to China's threat. Since Australia is a member of the British Commonwealth, there is also an opinion that China has falsely stung the beehive of Australia because it is a country that European Union cannot ignore. China's retaliation focus on trade by banning imports of Australian wine and beef. Also, conflict with India seems to have stimulated the European Union to take another step. It was stated that such a provocation by China could also be set off in the countries of the European Union at any time. And this is the reason why the European Union as a united group has the need to deal with this situation. Under these circumstances, the ambassador of the European Union to China, Nicolas Shaffi, said on Tense, "The United States and Europe must unite to respond to China's awful warrior diplomacy, which is aggressively promoting armed threats and retaliation against the backdrop of a developed economic and military power." The EU ambassador to China, Shaffi, made their position clear at an energy forum in Beijing. "We hope that the EU will be aligned with the next US administration and policy towards China. We are ready to cooperate with China and we will work together as much as possible when China is willing to cooperate. However, if necessary, we will object. In addition, we need a common awareness to say no to blackmail, threats, and arrogant diplomacy from China." He also made a statement about the problems in the South China Sea. "A willingness to resolve the South China Sea problem is essential. The South China Sea is an international issue not just for China. Europe, Australia, New Zealand, and Southeast Asian nations should find something in common on the issues of the South China Sea." His remarks attracted a lot of attention, as it is an expressive remarks about the current situation. Since China recently asserted sovereignty over almost the entire South China Sea, which led to conflict with neighbor countries. Indeed, the European Union was not very active in the US strategy against China before. They didn't readily agree with the Clean Network initiative, which included the claim that Huawei should be actively excluded from the international stage. But Ambassador Shaffi's remarks confirm that the European Union will decide with the United States in the future how to react towards China. US pressure on China will inevitably increase by 2021, and it is expected that a way will be found to be effectively counter China's hunger for power together with the European Union and not just the US alone. In fact, Trump's government stood alone in the fight against China. In the future, however, it is expected that China's maritime advances will be actively countered in solidarity with the ASEAN Union and Quad countries like India, Japan, the European Union, and Australia. The United States and European Union are also expected to launch a powerful offensive against China's human rights issue. The US government has put pressure on Beijing for enacting Hong Kong human rights law and Uyghur human rights law on its own. In the future, the pressure on China will increase by talking about human rights abuses in Hong Kong, Tibet, and Xinjiang. China has already become an enemy of the world. I already reported on the European Union's attitude towards China in a video clip entitled "Shocking Words from Xi Jinping at International Conference on October 25th. At the video summit between China and the European Union held on September 14th, the three European leaders confronted Chinese President Xi Jinping while urging him to get human rights and trade on the right track. President of the European Council Charles Michel said in the press conference, "Europe is a trading partner, not a playing field for China. We expect a fairer and more balanced relationship on the basis of the principle of reciprocity from the both sides." This reflects Europe's perception that China failed to deliver on its promise of a fair trade, and there have been claims that China is not doing fair at all in the investment and the trade sectors. Also, Charles Michel confronted President Xi Jinping and directly voiced concerns about Hong Kong, the Chinese Xinjiang, and Tibetan ethnic minorities. "We have urged China to keep its promise to Hong Kong residents and the international community. We are also concerned about the treatment of human rights defenders and journalists in there." Chancellor Merkel also urged President Xi and said, "Be clear about whether China really wants an investment agreement, which means that market opening and cooperation with China should be based on the certain principles of reciprocity and fair competition." Because of these conflicts, the summit ended without a solution. After the video conference, China mobilized the diplomatic power to appease the European Union's hostility towards China, but was criticized by the European side and treated as an official public enemy. At the end of August, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi toured 5 European countries, including Italy and France. As soon as Wang Yi returned from Europe with criticism, Yang Jiechi, director of the Central Foreign Affairs Commission of Chinese Communism, visited Spain and Greece to try to smooth the atmosphere, but failed to placate Europe. The Chinese boycott was actually brought up by the Chinese government itself. This is because China has criticized and ignored the other countries by using its economic power as a weapon. What do you think about this? Thanks for watching. Your likes, also comment. Be safe.